Welcome to the Private Practice Journeys podcast, where mental health professionals learn about the nuts and bolts of private practice by listening to the journeys of 4 therapists that have taken the plunge into private practice. And here's your host, Chris Quarto.
Hello again, this is Chris Quarto. Welcome to Private Practice Journeys. Hey, how is your private practice journey coming along? If you've been thinking about doing this, maybe you started it and are just kind of in the first few months, maybe the first year. How is that coming along? Do you need some helpful tips? Well, this is the place for you because I'm interviewing 4 therapists over the course of 2017. They have great information about what they're doing to make their private practices a success. And in fact, today I'm interviewing Lisa Duez. She's going to tell you exactly what's been going on with her. So without further ado, here's Lisa. Hi again, Journey followers. This is Chris Quarto, and welcome to the Private Practice Journeys podcast series. And with me today is Lisa Duez. And Lisa, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing great. Well, hey, I'm not sure if the Journey followers remember, but on your last podcast episode, you had talked a little bit about a training that you were going to go to the end of March. And so I just wanted to follow up with you about that. How did the training go and what came out of it?
The training was fantastic.
And what was that training again? If you could remind the listeners what that was all about.
Yes. So I am now, drum roll, a certified juvenile competency evaluator for the Commonwealth of Virginia.
All right.
Woo-hoo! I know. So I'm an expert. I'm not an expert in anything, but apparently I'm an expert in juvenile competency.
All right. That sounds great.
So when a kid goes to court and they commit a crime, it's constitutional law that you have to be able to assist your attorney in your defense.
Yeah.
And assist, provide just an understanding of the court proceedings. So competency evaluation is to make sure that the child can do that. And then if they can't, then they go through a program of restoration services, and then we do another evaluation.
Oh,
and then
great.
they proceed with trial. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's just a good, it was fantastic training.
All right.
Really good. Nice little vacation in Charlottesville, Virginia. It was nice.
All right. So this is something that you're going to start doing. This is, I guess, just add to the activities that you do for your private practice, huh?
Yeah. So I have to do an RFP, a request for proposal, for the state. And then once I do a request for the state, which is due in April, so I got to get to writing, I will be able to just accept referrals directly from the Commonwealth of Virginia, and then from the courts around here. And I don't know if you don't know about Hampton Roads in the Virginia Beach area, but it's really 7 small cities.
Uh-huh.
So there's seven courts that I can work with around here.
Oh, wow.
So it's good, yeah. It's a good. Plus, I started in juvenile work. I started as a probation officer. I started in the court system, and it's kind of going home a little bit.
Okay.
It's a good niche for me.
Yeah. Well, that's actually one of the first topics that I wanted to talk to you about today is just because I know that, you and I are on some of the same Facebook professional groups, and I know that every once in a while you'll see people post questions about, sorry about that. That was my cat. He's walking on my computer keyboard here.
Oh, funny.
But anyway, on the Facebook groups, you'll see people talk about, wanting to go into private practice and should I have a specialization or should I just be a generalist and all this kind of stuff. So I kind of wonder about that for you if, because you're still kind of early into your private practice plunge here. And if you've kind of decided to try to specialize and if so, how do you go about deciding on a specialization area? Like even this competency thing that you were talking about, how do you go about deciding on that? And what do you think about the whole notion of having a specialization?
When I first started in January and in December, I was probably a little bit more confused about, I just need people to come in the door. And I think my first few clients were very generalistic in nature.
Uh-huh.
But I think now I am all about the specialization.
Why is that? Why do you think that that's important for a private practitioner?
Well, for me, it's my strength. It's my strength is to work with women and substance abuse and trauma. And not that I have all of that, but I have, that's who comes to me. That's who calls. And
Yeah.
It's funny because I was very confused about what is that, because I like to work with anybody. It's like bottom line, you like people.
That's right.
And when you start, you want people to come to you. So I was was kind of unsure about that part of it. Maybe I'll just be a generalist. But I think as it developed and as I started getting those first few clients that had those particular issues, I said that's more of what I like. So, I have these very wide-ranging, competency stuff that I do, and then I have the, more of the women and the trauma. But I do have a couple teens and a couple men and in there. But I guess I would say that 65% of my practice is more of a specialization, and then the rest of it is just, people that I can work with well and that need help and called me. And we're doing it.
Well, it sounds like there's a couple things that you mentioned there. One is that it's your strength. I mean, you're focusing on an area that happens to be your strength, or you're getting additional training in an area to ensure that it's a strength. But also it's an area that you like. I mean, you like working with particular issues or particular populations, and that figures into the equation too. And I think that people in your community will, if they haven't figured that out yet about you, they're going to figure it out really quick and say, you know what, Lisa's the one to refer to for this or that. And, assuming that you do really good work, that's what's going to really ensure that constant stream of referrals in the future.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it was something to be said for just opening up and understanding that your first few months are just going to be, your generalist EAP referrals, just to get your name out there. But I found that it comes easier. There was a switch for me probably mid-February, early February, where I started to get more of, okay, these are more of my clients.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Very
but
cool.
I think it, I think it was, I was kind of, like I said, I wasn't on the board to specialization train at first, but I think I'm more now. I think it's a better fit, for me at least. I think it's definitely something to think about.
Yeah, and I think that it's a real good thing to think about ahead of time, even before you take that plunge into private practice, is that what are my strengths, what are my likes, what am I passionate about? And, perhaps looking at ways of thinking about, well, where would my referral sources be if I were to specialize in this area? And what would I need to do ahead of time to ensure that I can start to get those referrals early on after I start my practice. So I think there's a lot of just self-reflection involved in this process, as well as a lot of pre-planning. So yeah. Well, let me ask you, just kind of learning about your personalities. Our next topic here, Lisa. We're in a profession, you and I are, where we deal with a lot of different people. Clients with different personalities, obviously. And of course, that's the same for us too, as therapists, is that we all have different personalities. But I think that our personalities not only play a role in our work as therapists, but as business owners as well. And then, kind of looking at yourself, what is it about your personality that you think has, that's helped you in your role as a new business owner?
I think I'm very much a go-getter.
I
want everything done yesterday, which is a good and bad thing.
Yeah.
But I'm a very much an extrovert, a person. I do well with engaging with people.
Sure.
I think there's an element to private practice where you have to sell therapy to somebody, where you have to talk with them about why it's important that they come. And, I can do that pretty well. But on the flip side, I want everything done yesterday.
So you're saying, if I'm reading between the lines here, you tend to get a little bit impatient at times.
Yeah, I get a little impatient, mostly with myself.
Yeah.
And then my anxiety kicks in a little bit. But I'm a very outgoing, easy to get along with person. And I think that reflects in the counseling room, down to earth, type, what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
So
that really,
easy, but
it sounds like you're the type of person who probably derives a lot of energy from interacting with people. You have that kind of quality about you, and I think that also, just in terms of developing the business contacts and networking and all that kind of stuff, I'm sure that extroverted quality really pays off in that respect, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I just have to be careful not to be too extroverted. In therapy sessions, sometimes I'm like, stop talking.
Oh yeah, you mean you're telling yourself
that? Let the client talk.
Yeah.
Stop talking.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because, if you look at that whole extroversion, introversion thing, it's so fascinating because there are definite, strengths and weaknesses of extroverts. Same with introverts too. I mean, there are pros and cons with that introverted personality quality too. But, I wonder, because when you do this kind of self-reflection, if you've thought about if there's any particular personality trait that's posed a challenge for you, and how you've dealt with that.
Let me think. I tend to have a little bit of anxiety about things, so I can't just let it go.
All right.
And so that's that. I'm probably a reformed type A personality. What is that? A type C? I don't know. But just in private practice, it's you have to do it, and then sometimes you don't get the fruits of your labor until later on.
That's true.
You have to plant the seed, and then it takes time. So I'm like, well, I went to that referral source the other day, and they haven't called me yet, and it's like the next day, and I'm like, you're ridiculous, Lisa. Something like that, and just like the anxiety where I like things to be predictable.
Right.
And things are not predictable in private practice. So, for example, this morning, I had a 10 o'clock and an 11 o'clock. My 11 o'clock canceled. My 10 o'clock forgot. I'm like, oh. So I was like, what to do? So I was like, I went down to social services with my group stuff, and so I always have to be doing something. If I miss, a client, for some reason, I'm going to do it later. So your schedule gets a little crazy. So those two people rescheduled for later in the week.
Okay, so
so it's not the predictable 9 to 5 job, and this is what you will do at 10 o'clock on Thursday. That's a little bit like ugh.
Yeah, so it sounds like there are a couple of different things going on, really, is that when you have these things that happen that you don't expect, they happen kind of at the last minute. It's the frustration, then it's the anxiety of, oh no, they didn't show up. And of course, we had talked before about how, as a private practitioner, I mean, it's all income, it's all based on what you produce, obviously. So that can relate to that financial stress. But it sounds like what you do, Lisa, is you try to make the best of it by doing something in its place. So in this case, you went down to social services and whatever, made a pitch or whatever, but you tried to make the best of it in this situation in a way that would advance your practice. What a great way of handling situations like that. Yeah,
just to find something to do, to stay focused. And if and that has been me trying to teach myself over the past few months is that, no, don't go to Target.
Yeah, right.
Go to social services, and go and get yourself some clients or drop off. I'm starting a women's addiction group. So drop off your flyers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then on the way, I got 2 new clients. So they're coming. So it's kind of just bounces off, it balances out. So they canceled, they're coming in later, and then 2 more are coming in.
Wow.
So it just, so it just works out.
Yeah. Very cool.
I have to trust the universe.
Okay. Well, there's no, I think trusting the universe and, you doing your deal, what you do, I think the combination of those things, they sound like work pretty well together there. So
it works well. Yeah, it does. But there's not a lot of absolutes, and I'd like absolutes.
Well, this is true.
So.
Well, let me ask you a little bit about this too, just kind of learning about fee setting and fee negotiation, because this is another thing you see on these Facebook groups about people saying, I'm thinking about going into private practice, but I'm not sure how much to charge and how much do you guys charge? And of course, there are a lot of variables involved in the answer to that question, but how did you go about determining what your fees were going to be? And do you have different rates for services? So say a little bit about that, Lisa.
Well, I take insurance, so I'm not self-pay.
All right.
Although I do have a couple self-pay clients. So, when they call, that's been a little bit, it's probably something I need to work on a little bit. Had a guy call over the weekend, wanted to know if he could be seen that day, and I'm like, nope, Saturday, nope. And I asked him, did he have insurance, and he said no, and I said, my standard fee is X amount, and he said that he couldn't afford it, and I was kind of proud of myself because I said the X amount,
right,
and I said, well, what would be reasonable for you? And he said what was reasonable for him, and I said that would be fine.
All right.
Because remember, I think last podcast I said that I would take a few sliding scales.
Yeah,
I would probably
that's right.
take 2 a week. I would have 2 slots, so that was my second slot.
Okay.
So now they're both full. And so I took it, but it's still not a very comfortable conversation for me. I have to work on it.
Yeah, well, I did hear you say that you were proud of yourself for telling him what that amount was, and I think that's. I think the first several times that you do that, it's a difficult thing because it's sort of what we had talked about. I'm not sure if I talked about this with you or one of the other therapists about how you have to almost convince yourself at first that you're worth it, that you're worth that amount.
It's true.
And and it's okay. And it's okay to tell clients that I charge X amount. And I think over the course of time, it gets easier to do that. But I'm glad to hear that you did that. I think that that's a big step in your growth as a private practitioner, and it'll just get easier as time goes on.
It will. And it does have a lot to do with what you think you're worth.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of it, and that's like the part that you struggle with, that whole imposter syndrome stuff.
Right.
That you get when you start, I'm a fraud, or not a fraud, but I shouldn't be doing this. Nobody's going to want to come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But even with deductibles, sometimes it's when clients find out how much the contracted rate is, and you have to charge them the contracted rate, they're like, wow. And I'm like, they're like, can I pay less? And I'm like, well, but it's not going to go towards your deductible.
Right. Yeah.
You have to, your insurance company has said that this is how much it is, and this is how much it's contracted by, and I'm contracted with the insurance company, so I have to pay that much. You have to pay me that much.
Right.
And then your deductible will go down.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That's a real confusing thing for clients, isn't it? And just to kind of describe that stuff with the deductible, with the copay, with the coinsurance. Yeah. I mean, all that kind of stuff. It gets really confusing for them. And I've had to come up with ways of explaining that to them, but it's not always easy for them to understand, and they can get frustrated with all of that. And I get that, because if I were in their shoes, I would probably think the same thing. Well, what good is it to have insurance if you can't use it? But it's not really your problem as the therapist, because you didn't come up with that insurance plan for them. Their employer did, or somebody else did, the government, whoever it was. But it wasn't you. So well, let me ask you.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, and I have tried to figure out how to, I have a client that owes me her deductible. And so I'm having to put on the hat of being the collector of money, hasn't been in a little bit. So now we're playing phone tag, and I'm like, this is how much you owe me this for these 2 sessions that you came in and you decided not to come back to therapy. So, that's part of it that I guess I expected but didn't expect. When you're your own biller,
yes,
that's what you have to do.
Yeah, it's 2 different roles, and it can really make it tough, because sometimes you do. I mean, you do have to be strict about that, because it's a business, and you're not going to survive unless you get the money, obviously. So, but you're playing that second role, and I think that it could have a negative impact on your clinical role, and so. That would be a fascinating topic for us to discuss in the future too, is that whole collections, angle.
Yeah,
so
is.
Yeah,
we should talk about that later.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you about this, just kind of learning from other therapists or professionals. And, I think that looking at your own journey, and I look at mine too, that, there are so many people I can look back at and say, I've talked to all these people, mentors and people in the profession, and have learned so many things about them. But I wonder if there's anything that you've learned, maybe from on these Facebook communities that you're a part of, or somebody that have you gotten any kind of advice that you thought was really good, that you've really taken to heart, that's been a core part of your private practice so far?
I think I would not have, those Facebook groups that we're all in, I think that was such a world for me of, oh my gosh, there's people out there that want to do what I want to do, and they have the same fears as me. So I think that was my first real, oh my gosh, I'm not crazy about, worrying about how am I going to pay my bills.
That's
and
right.
all this other stuff, because they're the same thing. So that was fantastic to learn. And just scrolling through and reading, I learned from the other journey followers. I make sure I listen to all the podcasts of, Cindy and Amanda and Debbie. Amanda. Just because I know they're going through the same thing, and I learned from that. And then I have a good mentor here, and he kind of knows me, because we used to work in administration together, and he's retired and in private practice now. And so he's kind of my consultant.
Right.
And he kind of gives me some confidence when I need it. And I think I've got some good support. My suite mate is about a year ahead of me, and she's like, "Oh, I remember this time, and when I was 3 months in, I was, So I think everybody's there to help you along the way."
Right. Yeah.
And
I think it's so critical, don't you, to have those people? I mean, that you can rely on and just kind of show you the ropes. And, the thing I really love about these Facebook communities, private practice journeys and abundance, all these things that we're kind of, a lot of us are all in the same boat, or have been in that same boat, and we can relate to one another and provide one another with this advice and support. I mean, it's so amazing how much support there is, isn't it, on these Facebook communities? Oh, it's just wonderful.
Yeah, I never would have thought that it would have been there.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy that it's like just going there and, I literally went on there the other day because I had a question and I scrolled through things, and another person had almost the same question. I was like, wow, this is fantastic. Mm-hmm. My question's answered.
That's right. That's
and
exactly right.
Scroll through and hear people's successes is really nice too.
It is.
Because you are a little bit on an island in solo practice.
Mm-hmm.
You work for yourself. You can do what you want. but you need support. And you have to have just people that are, kind of have your back.
Right.
Can tell you can do it in those moments when you're like, ugh.
Yeah, to provide you with to provide you with that support, and like your suite mate, she's been there, she's done that, she's a year ahead of you, and so she can kind of tell you, okay, this is kind of how I dealt with this, or this is what I did, and it's so nice to have that kind of support. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me end this podcast episode with this last topic, Lisa, which is learning from clients. And sometimes clients will say or do things that impact us as private practitioners. It could be the way that we look at ourselves as personally or professionally, what we do, how we operate our practices, or how we approach life. Talk about how a client may have impacted you since starting or expanding your practice.
Oh gosh. I have this one particular client. She's a doll. She's in her 70s, and she's in recovery. She's been in recovery for about 50 years.
All right.
She's an African-American woman. And so she called me up, and she came into my office, and she sat me down. We sat down, and we were talking, and she's telling me about her journey, and she says, I have Lewy body syndrome. And I said, oh. And, that's a type of dementia that people have, and it's what Robin Williams had.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I said to her, well, I don't have experience working with somebody with Lewy body syndrome. I said, but I have worked with women in recovery for a long time. Blah, blah, blah. She goes, well, that's good. She goes, because I don't have experience having Lewy body syndrome. So it was really cool the way she reframed it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I don't care because this is going to work. And, she is just an absolute, the one thing about Lewy body is that what I have learned and what we have learned together is that when you're declining. So unlike dementia or Alzheimer's, you decline, but you're not sure. With Lewy body, you'll have hallucinations and different things happen to you, and then you'll remember it the next day.
Oh, all right.
And so that you're getting sicker, and so I'm helping her with that, and she's so absolutely insightful. This woman,
right.
Back in the 50s when she was in recovery for African American women, they didn't have places for people to do recovery for the African American community. So she built one.
Holy cow.
She's that kind of person. Yeah. So she's declining, and we're working through it. And so for me, it's learning this new thing. I feel so honored that she even chose me.
Oh, sure.
And then the other part of it is that I know that she's declining. And so I know that at some point she's going to pass.
Yes.
And we talked about that. She said, are you going to be okay with that? And I'm like, oh, geez. I guess. And so what she has taught me is that, she always comes in and she says, we're just so blessed. And I'm like, we're right. You're right. We're so blessed. And my anxiety and my, worrying about this and the client's canceled and blah, blah, blah. We're just blessed to be able to do this.
Right.
And she takes it back to that simplicity of just being able to do it, being able to be in the situation that you're in and be alive and breathing. And she's an absolute gem. And I think some clients teach you.
Sure.
And she's taught me. Yeah, some clients you learn. All clients you learn from, but some clients will teach you.
I couldn't agree with that more. And I think that what really the thing that you learn from this is, first of all, it's okay not to know everything. And,
Right.
and you can't as a therapist. I mean, you're not going to know everything anyway, but for her to say that to you, to communicate that to you, that it's okay, because really
Yeah.
that wasn't the most important thing for her. She
It wasn't.
wanted somebody who's going to listen to her and be with her. I mean, be with her really until the end. It sounds like from how she's kind of talking about this. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Lisa, when you said you felt honored by being able to be her therapist, and for her to ask you, given, what's going to happen to her, that is quite an honor. And I think that it really puts things in perspective, doesn't it? That, we get so wrapped up into these little things, kind of like what you were saying, you feel anxious about these things. A lot of these things in the long run, they don't really matter. What's the big picture here? The big picture is life,
right.
And living. And so, wow, what a fantastic learning opportunity for you with this client.
Oh yeah. And she's just, and she reminds me of that even when I'm getting a little anxious, she'll come in and, one day we'll have a session where she's like, she's hallucinating in the session. And the next week she's telling me about all these treatment things she used to do. And I'm like, geez,
Yeah.
But, in the whole thing, no matter what happens, she remains positive and she remains, steadfast, and we're going to get through this and it's going to be okay. And, I know where I'm going, and I've had a good life, and, that kind of thing. So she's just a stellar human being. And she blesses me, I think.
Oh, wonderful for you to be a part of all of that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so personally meaningful. Yeah, that's great. Well, Lisa, if anybody wants to get a hold of you, how could they do that, or check out your Facebook page or your website or any of that kind of stuff?
So it's just lisadewey.com. I'm trying to blog a little bit more.
Ah,
my
good.
goal. So I'm trying to blog.
Okay.
So and then I'm on Facebook, Lisa Dewey, and Dewey is spelled Duez, and then it just says LCSW. And then I'm on Instagram as the same name also.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully those Journey followers will check that out, and you and the other three therapists that are part of this. And once again, Lisa, I appreciate you coming on the podcast episode today. And like I say, it's quite a service that the four of you are providing by doing these podcast episodes throughout the year. So I really appreciate you coming on.
Oh, no problem at all.
Okay.
Glad to help.
All righty. Take care. Well, how'd you like that episode? There were a lot of similarities between what Lisa was talking about on this episode and what Amanda was talking about on the previous episode. They have similarities in terms of they're both go-getters. They don't waste time. They make the most productive use of their time. Both of them said that if they have clients who cancel, that they just don't sit there. They go out and do something to advance their practice. So I thought that was great advice. So I think that if you're thinking about going into private practice, these are good things to be thinking about, what is it like to be a private practitioner? What do you do? Like Lisa was saying, it's not like you just go to a 9-to-5 job, put in your time, go home. It's really a different mindset. Well, now remember, next month we have some special episodes coming up. I have invited 4 experts to come on to the podcast series and talk to the therapist, each one individually. I've assigned one expert to one therapist, and so I'm really excited to have these guys do these on-air consultations, and you'll be able to kind of peek in and see what it's like to work with these experts in their roles as consultants. So can't wait for you to hear that. Well, if you'd like to read the show notes for today's podcast episode, please visit my website, chrisquarto.com. I'll have everything there as well as Lisa's contact information, and if you want to check out her Facebook page and all that kind of good stuff, you'll find it there. Until next time, have a great rest of the week.